Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be in the world. This is Apollo Detectives number 5. I am Ben Emlyn Jones, and I'm joined yet again by some of the greatest Apollo detectives in the world. In fact, we're all in different places, which is just as well, because if we're all in the same place and a bomb went off, the Apollo Hoax community would run around like headless chickens. I'm joined this evening by some great guys. Some of them, I think all of them you've seen before, and they're back again. But it's not going to be a repeat of the last show. We've got some new information to discuss. So I'm just going to briefly introduce everyone who's on this evening. So we are joined first of all by our esteemed producer, Neil Geddes-Ward. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Ben, and hello, everybody else. It's good to be back here.
Hello.
Oh, hello, Marcus. Hi, Jarrah, and hi, Ben. Yeah, I am fine, although we're in the middle of this lockdown for the coronavirus, being March the 31st, 2020. It's the recording time of this. We're actually all in lockdown. Even in Australia, Jarrah's on lockdown, and he's just described a lot of similar things of behaviour there that's apparent here in the UK.
And we're also joined by another Apollo detective. I think he's Chief Inspector. I can call him that. It's Marcus Allen. Hello, Marcus. Welcome back to Apollo Detectives.
Thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate it. It's good to be here because there's so much going on with the Apollo stuff. I mean, anybody who follows the space excitement of NASA will know that they're all trying to do their very best to get back to the moon. Quote, return to the moon. And Elon Musk is launching his Skynet. He's just got a few things. In fact, I had a call today from somebody who's seen some of the satellites up there. You see about half a dozen of them following one after the other. Only at certain times when they catch the sun and you're in the shade of the earth, you can see them going across the sky. There are, I think it's something like 300 he's launched so far. He's got to do 2,000 in all. It's supposed to be something to do with internet access through space. Well, whether it's internet access from space or down from space, I don't know. Maybe ET is going to chime in at some point and say, "Hi guys, we're here too."
Let's go now to the co-host and our fellow producer. It's Andrew Chaplin. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Well, gentlemen, it's great you've joined us this evening on the Apollo Detectives for yet another episode, because a lot has happened since the last one. The previous one was about the 50th anniversary of the alleged Apollo missions, the first Apollo mission to land on the moon. And, of course, that was an informational choke point that we took good advantage of. Marcus, I know you were on the Herpanlo show as well. It was really great.
Yeah.
But since then, there's been a lot of updates, and in particular, something, Jarrah, I know you want to bring up, and this is a video that was actually made in the White House Oval Office. So what's that all about?
Well, basically, this said Trump invited Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin to the Oval Office, and also a few other officials from NASA. And they were basically, discussing, okay, this is the 50th anniversary. It's been all this time. Here's all the great things that we've done, and now we've got to look to the future. Trump and even Aldrin actually made some rather interesting comments that rather shocked me in a way, because it's pretty much almost hits the nail on the head. Essentially, what we've been trying to point out, like Trump, he actually said, "I know there was a lot of delays and stuff that have been happening." And I thought, my God, that's an understatement. Then Aldrin, he actually brought up that he was very displeased with the progress of the new Artemis program. And he basically said, okay, in the 1960s, we had the Saturn V, we had this capsule. Basically, we could launch to the moon in like 3 years' time. Now we have a capsule. We can't even get the rocket registered. We've been trying to get all this, ready in time and stuff. Everything's been delayed. What went wrong? It's like a little wink to the hat, because he literally practically took the words out of our mouths, what we've been saying. Like, supposedly we went to the moon back in the 60s with this primitive technology. You think there would be cities and bases on the moon by now, but instead it's just gone completely backwards. And the Orion program, if I recall correctly, was announced in 2004. Bush Jr., he used it as a re-election campaign. Oh my God, that was nearly 20 years ago. Then Obama came along. He essentially cancelled all the moon landing aspects of it. Initially, he said, we can't afford to treat the taxpayers' money like it's monopoly money anymore, so we got to cancel the program. He came under fire as a result of that, so he came up with a bit of a compromise for that. We've been there before. Buzz has already been there. Let's just skip the moon, head off onto Mars and asteroids.
Yeah, it's like it's really weird because Phil Cooch, the columnist at Nexus magazine, but he makes this good point that with 1960s technology, the Apollo mission was conceived of and succeeded within 8 years, actually, or less than that if you include Apollo 8.
Yeah.
And now we have 21st century technology, and they're saying, oh, maybe sometime in the next 50 years we'll get back to the moon. And we have Russia and China sort of saying, oh, come on, let's have another space race, guys. So this is an important point. I'm sure Marcus will tell us all about this. And we did discuss this on the last show, but it's worth repeating. Can't they just sort of like build a sort of new upgraded version of Saturn V? I mean, that's what they've done with Soyuz. They just simply took the original 1950s design and they kind of like made it better. They kept what was good about it and just added things that were just replaced things, elements of it that were obsolete. Jared, do you think that there's something up with Aldrin? I mean, I'm not saying that Buzz Aldrin is actually coming over to our side, but he has shown signs, I would say, of being a bit mentally slow, as you would expect a man of his age suffer from mental problems. And he's said a couple of things that I think it's almost like he's forgetting the script and he's deviating off it. I mean, what do you reckon?
Well, they're all getting older by the day. In fact, this the video I sent you guys, we were talking about just now, they're both seen standing while Trump is just sitting at his desk. Everyone else is just standing around him and stuff. I looked in the comments, people were going, mate, these blokes are nearly 90 years old. Let them sit down, for Christ's sake. You can tell that they're, I guess, degrading every day, it seems. And, well, that happens.
But, Marcus, you wanted to add something to this because you've got some impression that Trump knows more than he's saying.
My impression is that when Trump announced the Artemis program, Artemis, by the way, in Greek mythology was Apollo's twin sister. So we're obviously going to land women on the moon. Well, I presume that's it. In fact, it was basically Mike Pence, the vice president, who did the official announcement. But my view is that Trump, for all the faults he may have, is very, very well informed. I would find it very difficult to believe that he wasn't aware of some of the questions which have been raised about Apollo. He's got his ear to the ground. He's got a lot of people around him who are fully conversant with some of the more outrageous stuff that's going on. Now, if Trump is aware that there are questions about the Apollo mission as described by NASA, that famous agency, never a straight answer, if he's aware of some of these questions which have yet to be adequately answered, he can't come out and just say, oh, I don't think NASA know what they're doing. They're a complete load of idiots. And we put a few people in there. And, they got a new director there, Jim Bridenstine, who used to be a senator. So he's obviously controllable. If Trump is aware that there are question marks over Apollo, he's not going to come out and say, I think it was a load of rubbish. I don't think it happened. What he's going to do is to give NASA a realistic target. Oh, go back to the moon. 2024 is the official figure. That happens to be the end of, hopefully, Trump's second term. It all sounds very logical. It's very reasonable. If they can't do it, and this is 5 years from the announcement, 2019 was the announcement, if they can't do it in 5 years, Trump is likely to call them out. Trump doesn't stand for incompetence. He tends to call people out if they're not doing what they claim to be able to do. So if they can't do it, and NASA are already giving indications that they can't do it, they want another 4 years, 2028 they want to go to. This is going to be longer than it took Apollo from a standing start to allegedly getting onto the moon. So if they're supposed to be doing it again 50 years later, why is it taking longer than the first time? So Trump may start putting pressure on them. And he may start saying, oh, come on, guys, just dig out those old plans. You had a big rocket, Saturn V rocket. You had a lander back then. They haven't got a lander now. You've got the Orion craft, so that'll get you there. So what's the problem? Oh, we need more money. We've got to research it more. Well, didn't you research it the first time? Oh, we've got all this radiation problem. We've got to protect our astronauts. Well, you protected them the first time. What's the problem now? Just dig out the old plans and stick them in a capsule similar to it. And away you go. Now, if they don't achieve it, if they don't actually come up with the goods, i.e. allegedly land back on the moon by 2024, there are going to be more than Trump asking the questions. There are going to be a lot of other people saying, well, why was it so difficult now when it was so easy 50 years ago with the technology designed using slide rules, not computers even. What's the problem? Because there's nobody working at NASA now who worked at NASA in the 1960s. They've all retired or died or moved on. So there's nobody there now. So they're all enthusiastic, young, go-getting computer geeks who will dig out the old plans and see what they did the first time. Let's update. Oh, where are those plans? Oh, we lost them. Because the more stuff we can hear from NASA now, it appears that they are becoming fully aware that the first time it never really happened as described. And NASA are getting into a real problem with this. There was also another comment I saw about 2 or 3 weeks ago, following the announcement about the new Space Force, the sixth part of the US military, the Space Force. And the comment, it was almost an offhand comment saying, well, of course, NASA will be folded into the US Space Force, and then you won't hear any more about it. So it's as if NASA have had a death sentence passed on to them by the US Space Force. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know, because the Space Force, we don't really know too much about what it's intended for, what it's going to be doing. But NASA don't appear to be involved in any of the planning for the new Space Force operations. They haven't got the staff who can actually do the work. They haven't got the contractors who can do the work, because they don't know what they're doing either. The whole thing is so tied up with anomalies and inconsistencies and unexplained details. It's Apollo 2.0.
It's as if Trump can't say it openly, but he's trying to paint NASA into a corner.
Yeah.
Which they can't get out without just admitting it. And then, maybe this could be a symbol, a start of a change of the culture, maybe necessary to do this. Andy, what do you think, that we are approaching a point where the things we're talking about could be discussed openly?
Absolutely. This has been planned for a long, long time, Agenda 21. And you'd think, we hear this word key workers, so we think of key workers like NHS, police, firefighters. Would you say a 5G worker is a key worker? Because apparently there's a ton of 5G towers going up everywhere. So I think what's going to happen, in answer to your question, Ben, I think the tinfoil hat people, i.e. us lot, we're going to be proven right. I don't want us to be proven right. I wish we were proven wrong, but I think time after time, it's a case of ticking the boxes, tick, 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 tick. And it's only a matter of time before they get down to the moon landings. And as Marcus rightly said, if Trump knows or suspects that we didn't go and is calling their bluff, and they say, actually, we can't make it in 5 years, I think that's going to be another tick in the box, really.
I can't think, why do these people still cling to the idea that we went? I was telling you about the rocks picture that I've got from Apollo 17 in, I forget the crater now.
So we should let viewers know that this is breaking news. This is completely new research. And if it's true, well, Neil, take it away. What's this all about?
Now, I didn't discover this. This is not breaking news, this particular bit, but I just thought I'd show this. This is from Apollo 15. I did see this about a year ago on someone's recording, and I tracked it down. There's a footprint there, a load of footprints. There's the astronaut footprints there. You can see with a large tread. But just where it's circled, you can see what appears to be the tread of someone else, another shoe. Someone thinks it's possibly a tennis shoe or something like that, which would have been probably quite easy to wear or common to wear at those times in the 70s.
So it's a completely different tread pattern. Could it be identified with any particular make of shoe?
Well, this is what I was wondering, if anyone knows what that tread pattern is. I'm just trying to think of the popular makes of pumps or sneakers or whatever. Adidas comes to mind.
I'll probably think of a counter argument that someone might make. So it's obviously the lower one is like a fresher one, and it's on top of what looks like the sneaker one. Somebody might argue that it looks like somebody's stepped there, but then maybe like twisted to the side slightly and then kind of like did another little step.
Possible.
Imagine you're taking a step, and then kind of like you're twisting to the side, maybe to grab a piece of a tool or something, or to look a different direction. But then you kind of stagger a little bit and you take a little mini step.
But if you look at the actual outline, if I just move my mouse, this outline here, yeah. Now, if you're going to twist your feet, say if this is the feet you're talking about and they're going to twist, you would get more of a distorted pattern rather than that. Also, those lines there, they're quite solid, but much thinner than these thick lines here.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at.
So it starts off and then comes into a bit of a, especially at this point here, a bit of an S-bend joint there. So I would probably say, size 9 or 10 shoe or something, maybe like that. But also on the Apollo shoes here, you've got the very wide flat part here, which is evident on these sections there. But here, it just seems to be a very, very thin section.
I've just searched for some, shoe tread. I put in shoe sole treads. And there are numerous makes of shoe that have patterns very like that. Sure, it can be purchased today. I mean, obviously this was quite a number of years ago, more than 50 years ago, but it seems to be quite a common type of tread pattern. And you obviously don't see that with the Apollo boot covers.
Apollo Saturn then, AS-15-86-11671 from the mission of 1971. Now, interestingly, it has a whole description there of the mission, but it doesn't talk about that footprint. I've seen a couple of versions of this, one where they've completely removed that section in Photoshop and the shadows were different and stuff like that. And it's still called the same number, which was interesting. So it looks like someone's tried to mask that particular mistake, because a lot of people, researchers are aware of this particular pattern on the internet, it seems. So this is what I've been looking at. And I've been looking over at this area here. So this is called Camelot Crater. This is from Apollo 17. I thought, well, I'll start with all these rocks, because I know from Scott Henson's experience, he's found loads of weird stuff amongst all these things. So I thought, there's a whole nice load of rocks. So I'm going to have a look in there. And this is only discovered this last night, literally last night. But what I want to draw your attention to is these two particular rocks here. Look at these two rocks. What's the odds of these two rocks being exactly the same? I call these pigs in space. Because look, a little stone there, a little stone there. That's a little shape just like a little piggy. And here's another little piggy. The third one went to market or to the moon. And they've got the same kind of shape here. They've even got little ears, as I call them, and little snouts. I know that people saying, "Oh, it's pareidolia. They're not really pigs." I know that, but these rocks, what's the odds of those two rocks looking pretty much exactly the same, 98% the same?
If you look at the shadow, the shadow effects are slightly different for the two rocks. I want to make a point here about when the skeptics say pareidolia, and they love the. By the way, by skeptics I mean skeptics in the kind of like metaphorical sense of the skeptic movement, not just the scientific skepticism itself. There's an audio version which is apophenia and pareidolia is visual. It's where you see random shapes and you think that you are picking out an organized form within them. So, for example, you look at a cloud and you think, oh, that looks a bit like my grandmother's face, and things like that. Or you listen to a noise and you think you're hearing words. The problem with the pareidolia argument, which the skeptics do, is the same with when they call coincidence on everything, is that when you ask them, well, where's the statistical ceiling above which you'll stop saying that? Because if there is no cutoff point, it can be applied to anything. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card that can apply to anything. For example, they could say that the amazing mural in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City, that's a random splash of paint. Michelangelo didn't actually paint that. He just got angry one day and kicked some paint pots around, and he liked the pattern that emerged.
Yeah.
And you can't, unless the skeptics declare the statistical ceiling, you can't prove them wrong. I made this point when I was that they can't be proven wrong. You can't prove that's actually a painting. I made this point to Dr. Paul Rogers, actually. I used the example of winning the National Lottery 5 weeks in a row. I'd ask any NASA supporters who are poised with that on their tip of their tongue to shout at Neil to think of that.
Okay, here we go again. So I'm going to come into this part here. Again, people might say, oh, the astronaut dropped that or whatever like that. And if you did drop it, then they obviously brought an extra lot of things to the moon. So I'm just looking at things like, for instance, that looks like a wristwatch to me, that thing there. See, a little central part there, an overhanging strap there and something there. It looks like a wristwatch. I'm not saying it is, but it just looks like a wristwatch. Okay? How I wanted to show everybody was what looks like to me, and again, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it reminded me of a horseshoe.
There's Jack Smith walking away from the camera. Now, if you look at his backpack, or look at where the sun is in relation to him, the sun is more or less straight ahead of him. And you can see a lot of detail in his backpack. Presumably, if you enlarge it, you can get more detail. But if you look at the rocks on the ground, just behind him, the shadows on the rocks are black.
This is another example of the filling in light that, Marcus, you talked about previously with the shot of Aldrin coming down the Lem ladder.
That's right, yeah.
It's very similar, this, isn't it?
It
you
is.
can see the stars and stripes. You can see it looks like there's little pockets on the back.
Yeah, you can see a lot of detail in the shadow of his backpack. Now, if he's being illuminated by this magical reflective property of the lunar surface, which is what the Apollo supporters always say it is, of course it reflects the light. Well, of course it does. You can see the damn thing from 250,000 miles away. It'll reflect light, but is it enough light to be reflected from that backpack and to be picked up on the film that was used to make this picture? It's photographic film, don't forget. It was not digital. It's been digitized to put it online. But the original image was on a photographic film. If you can lower the picture a bit so you can get the rocks in the picture at the same time as the astronaut, so we can see the shadows on the rocks. Now, they're quite close to the ground. So if this magical reflective property has any validity at all, you'd expect to be able to see more detail in that dark side of the rock than you would in the astronaut, who's a much higher up. Just straight logical thinking, this picture makes no sense at all. If the explanation is that the property of the lunar surface is such that it will reflect light to shadow area as it is on the backpack of the astronaut, why isn't it putting it into the detail of the rock much lower to the ground? It's interesting to say that Bob Brannig's website has been taken down. I think he's been exposed for making so many errors in his calculation that he had to get it down. I mean, it's like one big monkey. He keeps coming up with these explanations, which when they're examined in any detail from a strictly technical point of view, make no sense at all.
He made a whole article responding to me and my previous video on the radiation. And he also added his own website, so his own article about calculating how much radiation the astronauts would have received. But when looking through his article, I found that it was mostly based on downplaying the amount of radiation they would have received. He was using, outdated sources to determine. Okay, like one of the things he was saying was that any radiation that's higher than 100 mega electron volts will pass clean through the astronaut. Well, that's simply wrong. The radiation that they use in proton therapy, it's accelerated to something like 200 to even maybe 250 mega electron volts, and that's within the same energy range as what we get in the Van Allen radiation belts. Then he was also claiming that only radiation that's higher than 100 mega electron volts will get through the spacecraft. Again, that's not true. You look up NASA's own data from the 60s. In 1963, there was this paper by J.W. Keller. In fact, I actually got their book right here as well. In fact, this was published in this Astronautical Engineering and Science. They actually had a chart, showing the attenuation of the thing. I'm not sure. Obviously, you're still sharing the screen there and stuff. I'll show you when you're done. But basically, their chart showed that the shielding equivalent to that on Apollo would have only attenuated up to 8 mega electron volts of energy of protons.
He did literally remove his website because he realised he'd made so many mistakes and he was a liability. It's, we can see what Marcus and Jarrah proved here is the photographs. I mean, Marcus, you mentioned this whole situation, and Jarrah, your experiment was to try and recreate the image using the methods that we're told the Apollo astronauts used, which was like a single camera and the only light source being the sun and reflected light from the environment.
The closest and the largest light source, in space at the time. All the stars, they're like light years away. The planets, even though a lot of them are much more reflective than the moon, they're so far away that they just look like stars. That's the reason why the moon looks so bright. But in actuality, it's very dull as far as reflective surfaces.
Well, if the moon was as bright as it needed to be, this takes us back to the NVIDIA thing, then it would be too bright to look at. Literally, nighttime with a moonlit night would be almost as bright as daytime, and the Earth, and we wouldn't. But what we see here is something which could only be created with multiple light sources, very carefully controlled, as David Percy and Mary Bennett says in their book. You need multiple light sources, fill in light with proper reflectors and things like that to get the effect you're looking at. This is a studio-created image, and Marcus and Jarrah, I think, have proved that.
In the temperature they've got there, we haven't even talked about the vacuum problems that are on the moon, which maybe if there's time we just cover it a bit. But one other point I'll say on this is that the book Full Moon by Andrew Chaikin, and one of the pictures in there, I think it was from Apollo 17, though I'd have to check it again, has exactly what Neil is pointing out. Duplicate parts of the picture appear as if it was the original image. And you could see there, because there are little groups of rocks in certain configurations which have just been duplicated in the picture to make the picture look better. It's so ridiculous. Now, I was filmed pointing this out by Chris Everard for his space series of films, Secret Space. I was filmed doing that over 20 years ago. It's quite possible to find these. So what Neil has found is in something that's...
Lunar Planetary Institute.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
That's the same website I use because it's just easier to use it than some of the other ones. Now, if you're finding these, pigs in space, I think it's very amusing. All right, it's possible to explain it initially as being a duplicate from a panoramic photograph where the two sides are overlapped. But that doesn't stand up to scrutiny because you would get other parts of the picture above it and below the pig the same on both sides. So either it's somebody having a bit of a laugh, maybe it's the set dresser think, I wonder if they'll spot the pig in the picture.
Bennett and Percy were talking about the whistleblowers, weren't they? Because some people...
The clues.
Yeah, they believe that they did this on purpose, which, well, maybe that's possible.
Okay, let me just show you some more things then. If we go actually to this smaller crosshair here and go down, you'll see these weird box-like constructions. I don't know if they're wheels or something, but look, they've got very sort of square angles to them and then bits at the end.
Yeah.
That's just one thing. But the main focus I want to come down to is this rock here that looks like it's got some sort of metal pipes. I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 pipes, maybe joined here and perhaps here with brackets of some sort, going all along the length of this rock. And if I just zoom out, you'll kind of see where it is in the lay of the land. And then what I'll do, I'll pan across this rock here, and I'm going to zoom in again. This object here, that appears to me to be a threaded screw nut type of thing. Do you see that there? Going into that rock?
That's very odd. I mean, it does. I can see it's like almost like a tap handle. Some of the covering has come off, and you can see a bit maybe framework underneath it. Sometimes it's chicken wire, but it looks like there's something more substantial at the base.
Yeah. Something else there, possibly. Don't know. But this was intriguing. This section here, because it blurs out the rock underneath it, and there appears to be a line. And to me, it looked like acetate or glass or something there that shouldn't be there.
Either that, or it's they tried to cover something up, and when they were editing the photos, they had to cover something up that was a bit too revealing, and they didn't spot the other things.
It was E.T.'s lunchbox. He forgot it.
So that's you can see all that. Look, the structure of these pipes go all the way through, and again, there seems to be something down here, bracket of something. And it reminded me a little bit what Scott Henderson has been pointing out, where bits of cars and all sorts of things you can find in these areas.
That actually kind of reminds me of stuff. I'm a geologist, and I've seen rocks having sort of lines like that, but it's usually sedimentary rocks and stuff. This is supposed to be igneous rock, which is that kind of stuff there is odd. Well, the line structure, as I was saying, you can get to line structures in sediments, in sedimentary rock, as I was saying. But igneous rock, that's interesting there, because usually igneous rock is just the solidification of magma. There's no change or any sedimentation or anything like that.
And so sedimentary rocks are they're created by, is it sand or something that solidifies layers of sand?
That would be a form of sedimentation, yes.
But the moon, there's never been any sort of water, so there's never been any sand. Supposedly it's completely dry. There's never no water to create sand.
You got no weathering conditions. You got no oxidation. Geologically dead as well. So you got no recycling of the of the surface or anything like that. And yet, of course, we have the ferric iron and large amounts of water in those zones, which that there is a giveaway.
Unless, if someone's going to say that's another meteor from Earth, aren't they? They'll say that's a sedimentary rock that passed over. I mean, they've done that one before. We just talked about it in the last program, and they're going to try and pull that card again.
Basically, this was called the International Lunar Resources Exploration Concept. Okay, as this was basically a part of the original Bush's plan to return. And when this was opting for what was called a lunar surface rendezvous, in which basically the craft doesn't have enough fuel to get back to the Earth, so you have to refuel on the Moon. So this is literally a moon or bust option. But what I found interesting about this is this was going to be using one of the proposals. Here's actually a photograph of it, or rather an artist's rendition of it, I should say, on the lunar surface. They have like an Apollo-style capsule here, which is connected to all these tanks and engines and stuff. And they were considering many different launch vehicles, including the Soviet Buran was one of the options. But this is one of the launch vehicles that was considered was the Shuttle C. Essentially, you got the same booster rockets, you got the same external tank, and only instead of the orbiter, basically you take off the orbiter and you put on this cargo mount, which basically has the shuttle's main engines, and inside is the actual payload. Now, this here is the actual spacecraft, and down here is the trans stage, which is supposed to carry them to the moon. And this was proposed back in the 90s when it was George Bush Sr.'s idea of returning to the moon. There was another idea which was called Lunar Early Access, which was
that's the lander, is it?
This is a more straightforward idea. They have the same space shuttle as always, only this time they have an Apollo-style capsule, these landing leg things here. That's launched from the space shuttle's cargo bay. The actual trans stage will be launched by a separate rocket. They're proposing either an Ariane 5 or a Titan. They still had the Titan rockets back in those days. And the idea was that these two would dock. And here's the thing, this one wouldn't actually enter lunar orbit. It would literally be fired straight at the moon and has to make a hard landing, I should say, by firing its engines before it would essentially crash into the lunar surface. This is seriously what they were proposing back in those days, but what's important to note is that these both proposed using shuttle technology. Like this one is obvious. This was proposing to put the Apollo-style capsule with the descent stage into Earth orbit. It would dock with some other vehicle, launched by another spacecraft. This one proposes, taking off the orbit, but still using the boosters and the engines, but it has essentially an unmanned cargo variant of it.
It's interesting here. I mentioned Arthur C. Clarke as a kind of joke earlier on, but if you look at some of his early science fiction, he makes a point that seems to be not lost on the people who make these designs that Jara's just shown us. Now, of course, Apollo wasn't like that. Apollos were all single launch missions. Everything was just bunged on the top of one rocket, the big Saturn V that Marcus described. That was sent to the moon. It came back. It was a very simple plan compared to those which Jara's just described and what Arthur C. Clarke described long, long ago, before anyone allegedly went into space. So NASA are essentially retconning the entire Apollo missions to try and fit it in with what we're saying. What they don't realize is they're saying these things now, which they didn't say at the time. It's like the thing you said about the radiation, Jara, when you had contacted Elon Musk. It's all stuff they've come out with since we've been talking. These are not contemporary things, which they should be contemporary because they should be essential design features of the missions.
There's something I'd like to push up here. This is the first page. You come down to this article here, Apollo Ectochrome film subject to recycling in a vacuum. That's just been published, which talks about the work that is being done in Canada by Rob Williams, and it's written by me and Scott Henderson. So for anybody watching this program, have a look at this website, owlist.com, Owlist Online, and you'll see the report on the vacuum testing. It's what's blown NASA apart, actually, because here are the pictures which show the control on the left and the same image taken with a film that has been taken out of the vacuum chamber. And notice how the color balance on the film is completely shot. The contrast levels are completely different. Here's another picture. It's the same image on a different roll of film, This is a normal roll of Kodak Ektachrome. This is Kodak Ektachrome after it has been subjected to 3 recyclings through a vacuum chamber.
And as Scott has pointed out, you put it in a vacuum chamber, but the vacuum it would have actually had to put up with on the moon would be even more extreme.
Exactly. The only level of vacuum that they could create here on Earth with the vacuum chamber they got, which cost several $100s, was the equivalent of being in low Earth orbit.
And to clarify, the camera, the Hasselblad camera with which this Ektachrome film was put in, was not pressurized in any way.
It wasn't pressurized, nor were the film cameras, the data acquisition cameras mounted in the Apollo command module, photographing outside through the pilot's window, that's the right-hand side, of all the activity on the moon. That's the Hexagon spy satellite on display now, which used photographic film. This is the point. Stereo panoramic cameras had to be kept pressurized, and they were pressurized within this housing, 1 pound per square inch.
How long was the Ektachrome film actually kept inside this chamber that you had?
It was over a period, I think, of 3 days, which was trying to recreate what happened on Apollo 17, where they had 3 EVAs. So what they were to recreate was the depressurization of the lunar module.
This is very incriminating because it essentially you proved that this kind of film is damaged by exposure to a vacuum.
There was something I wanted to ask you about, Marcus.
Yeah.
Were there any tests, these vacuum tests, done on much shorter exposures to vacuum?
I think there are further tests going on. They're still doing the tests now. And it's certainly true to say that because we see photographs of Ed White with a camera, obviously in space, well, we assume he's in space, we make that assumption. I don't recall seeing the pictures that he took with that camera. Now, it may well be that at that point they discovered that there were problems with photographic film. This is photographic film for anybody who's never seen a bit of photographic film. Photographic film is plastic backed, emulsion coated, light sensitive material. One of the techniques of filming, if you want to alter the characteristics of a film, you basically pinch it with your fingers, or finger and thumb. You put pressure onto the film, and that will affect the film. And we're talking a vacuum on the moon of torr of 10 to the minus 11, which is a harder vacuum than can be created anywhere here on Earth. Even the Glenn Research Center in Ohio, which is what NASA used, and if you recall Brian Cox doing his dropping the ball and the feather at the same time, he was using the Glenn Research Center vacuum chamber to do it, to show that they both landed at the same time. Of course they would. There's no air in there, nothing to stop the feather falling down. But that can only pull a pressure of 10 to the minus 7, not the same as on the moon. But when you get this sort of image from something relatively light, a relatively low vacuum, this sort of distortion of the emulsion and the recording on the film, you've got to ask the question, how do they produce such beautiful studio quality images from the lunar surface?
No worries, Marcus. Thanks for that. That's very interesting. Exclusive new information here, ladies and gentlemen, on the allowlist.com website. Andy, you there?
I am, yeah. I was just, it's fascinating, really. I just wondered where Owlis actually got its name from. I don't know if Marcus knows.
It's a Greek mythology name. Let's just say that this new article here from Phil Coots, who's written several brilliant articles on Moonbase and how they couldn't build one. It's a very interesting article about the critical thinking behind Apollo, or what you should apply.
So this is on our list as well.
Yeah, this is on our list. It's only just been put up, so not everybody will have seen it. Anybody new to the Owlis website, you've got several days of reading to catch up with where we've got to.
If you get round to simulating the much shorter durations for the Gemini, I'll just look this up here. The Gemini 4 spacewalk was only 20 minutes. On Gemini 12, Aldrin got about 2.5 hours outside on his EVA. He also had a standard EVA, which was just under an hour, 55 minutes. I think that would be a worthwhile sort of investigating. I'm not sure if this is the same camera that they use and stuff. They had a few cameras, actually. There was this one called the Pilot Observer camera. I'm actually looking at it right now. Yeah, this is what they call the Gemini Pilot Observation Camera. I think that's what they called it, which they use to film, reels of film inside the cabin. I'm not sure if this camera was pressurized, but by the looks of it, it looks like a sealed box almost.
It would certainly be pressurized inside the cabin because he isn't wearing a visor.
Just saying, I'm not sure if they're using pressurized cameras on the Gemini and stuff, but I think it would be something that you should investigate for, for cross-referencing, just to make sure and everything.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Gemini. I know people will probably cite that in response to these new discoveries with the film in the vacuum chamber.
Yeah.
On the subject of the lunar base, which Phil Coots writes about, I remember, people said, well, would the Apollo astronauts live long enough to see another moon landing? When the Apollo missions actually happened, there was absolutely no question of it. Some of them were saying, well, when they're going to go back, they'll probably be going back in a couple of years. Well, if you read the science fiction, like I'm an Arthur C. Clarke fan, and if you read the science fiction of that era, they predict without a doubt that within a couple of decades there would be permanent bases on the moon. Regular space travel would become as routine as air travel. Expeditions to the outer planets, all these kinds of things. And I'm sure everyone was so excited that I'm sure if they could have seen forward in time to the year 2020, they would gasp in dismay.
You look at technology, how it progressed over the years and stuff. Like back in the 60s, the only way, having a kinescope to record your favorite TV shows, that was a luxury back in those days. Then Betamax comes along. Oh wow, this is amazing and stuff. Then of course there's the format wars with VHS and everything like that. Now we've got Blu-ray, we've got streaming, we've got everything. That's just one example of how technology has just gotten better and better over the years. Somehow, with the space program, this is the one technology that seems to have gone backwards.
Oh, it's really, yeah. So it's not even stayed the same. It has literally gone backwards, as Phil Coots has demonstrated. Now,
Randy, he's uploaded a video of himself flying his plane because he's been accused of not being a real pilot.
He's a real pilot.
Yeah, someone filmed him, and actually they also uploaded the unedited version because the accusations went further, because they said, oh no, he could be a student pilot and the actual real pilot is the guy that's filming it, which was a bit of a silly thing because, you're letting your student be in full control of a plane whilst you're in charge of a video camera, which is not the done thing as an aviation person, I suspect. So they decided to put the unedited version, 20 minutes or whatever it was, up that shows the whole thing of him being the actual pilot. So this is Randy, who will be discussed this in our next show, yeah.
Let's say Phil Platt has got some more explaining to do. If Phil Platt is one of Randy's protagonists, because now Randy has issued a challenge to debate online in public with him. All his trolls have been asked to debate with him, and not one of them has accepted.
I travelled all the way to Las Vegas back in 2010, to track this plate guy down. He was actually appearing at one of James Randi's conventions. I called out Adam Savage during the Q&A session.
I remember that.
And he was like, entertainment, not science, which it flies in the face of what they were trying. They're going around saying, oh, it's busted. This. I said, hey, you filmed you never slowed down the wire rig footage, and if you do that, you find it matches up nicely with the original Apollo 16 footage. And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. What we do is in science. We're an entertainment show, and our job is to demonstrate this and that, the scientific. I can forget exact words and stuff, but basically the gist of it was that, we're an entertainment show. Phil Plait, he was originally going to give me an interview with one of the representatives and stuff. It was a guy by the name of Austin Cooten. He was able to arrange a 15-minute interview between me and Plait, and he backed out after I called Savage out on his nonsense. Because he has often gone around claiming that Casing denied any space travel was possible. That's a complete lie, because in the actual interview that Plait cites, Casing specifically says that, possibly Al Surveyor did land on the moon. I believe that certain unmanned missions might have made it to the moon. The Russians were supposed to have done that. He makes clear that he doesn't believe that man went to the moon and stuff, but he conceives that unmanned missions to space are possible. Yeah. Unmanned missions to the moon are possible. He even cites some of the space missions in his book. He cites the biosatellite, things like the various Tetra satellites that they had, for training astronauts and stuff. This is all in his book. He clearly knows that space travel is real. And yet, Phil Plait puts words in his mouth by claiming that Casey denied any space travel was possible. He's made that claim at least 3 times. In fact, when I posted my Moonfaker series, the first episode, he actually went into the comments, I asked them, why don't you talk about Operation Dirty Trick? You might remember the Operation Northwoods thing where they're planning on invading Cuba, using false flag attacks. One of the false flags they were considering was if the Mercury capsule exploded and John Glenn was killed, they would blame his death on Cuba, use it as an excuse to invade Cuba.
It's obvious like that Phil Plait has lied. Like they often lie about us. They know they're in the wrong and they don't like it, and they're using dirty tricks when they're not going quiet, which is what they are.
None of them show their faces.
Yeah.
We're showing our faces. None of them show their faces. None of them give their real names. That's cowardice of the worst sort.
The lie can only be maintained for a short time, indefinitely. You can't fool all the people all the time.